Well, for a lot of you, Tom Shippey doesn't need much of an introduction, but for those of you that don't know enough about him, Tom is a Professor Emeritus of English at St. Louis University, and throughout his long academic career he's had two main interests: modern fantasy and science fiction, and I start with that for a reason, and medieval literature and philology. As a Tolkien scholar, it's not an exaggeration really to say that Tolkien scholarship is established and started seriously with Tom's monographs, especially The Road to Middle-earth and the later J.R.R. Tolkien, Author of the Century. And there's also been a great collection of articles of Tom's in hard-to-find publications that now appear in Roots and Branches. Very, very useful collection of those of you that didn't know about it. I think it's always, it's a nice anecdotal thing to talk about the fact that there are links between Tom's career and J.R.R. Tolkien's career. They both went to the same school, King Edward's School at Birmingham. They both played rugby for the Old Edwardians. I think as Welsh people we'd be very appreciative of that. He taught at Oxford for 7 years at St. John's College, and that was the time, that kind of overlapped with Tolkien's last years of retirement at Oxford. And then Tom moved to Leeds, where he actually inherited Tolkien's chair and syllabus, and taught there for a long time. Again, those of you that don't recognise Tom from the Tolkien scholarship, you might recognise him from the commentaries on the extended DVDs of The Lord of the Rings, and he appears in all three of those. I think the other thing to mention is that in the last few years, Tom's been interested in medievalism, the ways in which the Middle Ages have been reimagined or appropriated in modern times, and he's been concentrating a lot on the work of Jacob Grimm. There's been a collection of articles called The Shadow Walkers that's come out, and there's more work coming out on that. He's also, I think again, it's quite cool to mention that Tom has worked collaboratively with a science fiction author, Harry Harrison, on two successful alternative universe trilogies, the West of Eden sequence and the Hammer and the Cross sequence, so some creative work there as well. He's now an emeritus professor. He's retired, but he's still very much publishing and active research-wise, and he's still reviewing for the Times Literary Supplement, the London Review of Books, and the Wall Street Journal. It's a great, great honour to have him here. Please welcome Professor Tom Shippey.
Well, I am going to talk about the legend of Sigurd and Gudrún, but I'll start with a brief excursus. And I'll start by telling you a story. Some years ago, I approached the commissioning editor at Random House, who are big publishers of science fiction and fantasy, and I said to him, look, I've got three ideas here. There's a historical fiction story, there's a science fiction story, and there's a fantasy story. Now, if you had those three in front of you, which would you buy? And he said, I'd buy the fantasy one. And I said, why is that? He said, and I got this pretty much verbatim, he said, only fantasy is mass market. Everything else is cult fiction. And then he paused and he said, that includes mainstream. I thought, well, okay, that's put English literature in its place. Now, he may have been covering up or excusing his own buying processes, but actually, there's obviously a certain truth in that. And it is a very strange phenomenon to have fantasy suddenly become, well, I think we could say, I think he said, and I think I agree with him, probably the major publishing area, at least as regards sales and as regards profits. Now, how did that come about? Because it certainly was not the case, thinking back 40 years ago. And of course, one of the main reasons for that is the success of Tolkien. It was Tolkien, you might say. I know it was Tolkien who actually persuaded publishers that actually they could sell big trilogies. They didn't have to sell a little 60,000-word ace books that they used to sell. They could actually sell 600 pages and have 3 of them, or 5 of them, or in the case of Robert Jordan, 12 of them, however many the hell it was at the end. And that actually, I think, was that was something that nobody expected, and which still, in a way, demands an explanation. But because it's regarded still in a way as a fringe activity around the edges of literature, the explanations have not, on the whole, been coming. However, if you want to find some explanations, you can do no better than take Dimitra's third-year undergraduate course on fantasy literature, Tales Before and After Tolkien, which, as you will see from the leaflet in front of you, would you like to know more about how Tolkien changed fantasy literature forever? Well, if you do, you take the course. Well, that's actually fantasy authors influencing Tolkien. But then, if you want to go on, you can actually take the MA course, which Dimitra teaches, Myth and Middle-earth in Context, which tells you really about the context of Tolkien. Because although he seems, in a way, as a kind of giant one-off, somebody who is writing by himself, you know, without encouragement, without supporters, of course, he had a context too. And that context, 19th and early 20th century context, has not, on the whole, been much studied, but that is what Dimitra's MA course is looking at. And actually it is, I think, uncovering a great substratum of fantasy literature, which, of course, has had its effects all